Admiral Korthax had seen many things in his 40 cycles of commanding the Galactic Coalition's 7th Fleet. He had witnessed the birth of stars, the collapse of empires, and the inexplicable tendency of the Vorplian species to eat their own furniture when stressed. But never, in all his years of service, had he encountered anything quite as baffling as humanity. The conference room aboard the Coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance was sweltering, absolutely, mind-numbingly, ridiculously hot. The environmental controls had malfunctioned 3 hours ago, and the temperature had climbed to what the ship's computer cheerfully announced was 48 degrees Celsius. Korthax's scales were beginning to crack at the edges. His third assistant had already passed out. The Veltronian ambassador was literally melting into her chair, leaving small puddles of bioluminescent goo on the expensive imported cushions. And there sat Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo of the Terran Defense Corps, wearing a full regulation jacket over her uniform, calmly reviewing the tactical readouts on her datapad as if she were sitting in a pleasant garden somewhere. Korthax's eye stalks twitched involuntarily. It was the only movement he could manage without feeling like his internal organs were cooking. "Lieutenant?" he rasped, his voice box struggling against the oppressive heat. "How are you not dead?" Maya glanced up from her datapad, her dark eyes reflecting the amber emergency lighting that had kicked in when the main systems failed. She looked genuinely confused by the question. "Sir?" "The heat, human. The heat." Ambassador Threlix has entered a protective coma. Commander Yalith is praying to 6 different deities. I myself am considering which of my offspring should inherit my military honors because I am clearly about to perish. Maya blinked. Once, twice. Then she looked around the conference room as if truly seeing her colleagues for the first time. The Vorplian delegate was indeed chewing on the corner of the table. The 3 members of the Arctuvian contingent had formed a pile in the corner, trying to share their dwindling coolant reserves. "Oh," Maya said, her voice carrying that peculiar tone humans used when they suddenly realized everyone else wasn't experiencing reality the same way they were. "Oh, yeah. It is a bit warm, isn't it? A bit warm. A bit warm." Korthax wanted to laugh, but he was pretty sure if he tried, his lungs would rupture. Maya stood up, and every eye stalk, and optical sensor in the room tracked her movement with the desperate attention of the dying, watching someone who inexplicably still had the energy to move. She reached up to her collar, fingers working the magnetic seals of her jacket, and simply took it off. The room fell silent, except for the labored breathing and various alien equivalents thereof. Underneath the jacket, Maya wore only a standard-issue tank top. Her arms, now exposed, showed not even the slightest sheen of perspiration. She folded the jacket neatly over the back of her chair and sat back down. "Better?" she asked, looking directly at Korthax. "You were wearing more layers?" the Admiral croaked, his vocal sac working overtime. "In this temperature? By choice?" "Well, yeah. Dress code." Maya shrugged, that universal human gesture that somehow managed to convey an entire philosophical treatise on the absurdity of regulations. "Besides, it's not that hot. Last summer in Lagos got up to 46 degrees, and Grandma still made me help her in the garden. Now that was hot." The Veltronian ambassador made a sound like a kettle losing its will to live. 46 degrees, Korthax repeated slowly, his brain struggling to process this information through the heat-induced fog. "And you performed manual labor, outdoors, for recreation. Not recreation, exactly. Something about our evolution on Earth. Persistence hunting, you know? We'd literally chase prey until they died of exhaustion in the heat. Our ancestors were kind of brutal like that." Commander Yalith, who had stopped praying long enough to listen, made a gurgling sound that the translation matrix interpreted as profound horror. Maya continued, apparently warming to her subject. Warming. Korthax would have appreciated the irony if he weren't currently experiencing what he was fairly certain was the early stages of heat death. We've got these great things called sweat glands. Basically, we secrete water through our skin, and when it evaporates, it cools us down. Super efficient. Plus, we can breathe through our mouths to dump excess heat, and our blood vessels dilate to increase surface cooling. It's pretty neat, actually. Neat. Ambassador Threlix mumbled from her protective coma. She said neat. How hot can you survive? Korthax asked, morbid curiosity overwhelming his sense of impending doom. Maya tilted her head, considering. Well, dry heat or humid? There are multiple categories? Oh, sure. Dry heat. You can survive higher temperatures because sweat evaporates better. Some humans work in environments up to 70 degrees Celsius for short periods. Saunas can hit 90 degrees. With high humidity, though, it's trickier because the sweat doesn't evaporate as efficiently. But even then, people live and work in pretty extreme conditions. 70 degrees. 90 degrees. Korthax's mind reeled. At 90 degrees, his species' cell structure would literally denature. They would, quite simply, cook. And your planet, he said weakly. Earth. It just naturally gets that hot? In some places. Yeah. Maya pulled up a holographic display from her datapad, showing a rotating image of Earth. She highlighted various regions. Death Valley in North America hit 54 degrees once. The Lut Desert in Iran recorded 70 degrees ground temperature. And those are just the extremes. Lots of places regularly hit 40 to 50 degrees during summer. Billions of humans live in tropical and desert climates. We just kind of deal with it. She said it so casually. We just kind of deal with it. As if adapting to temperatures that would kill most sentient species was equivalent to tolerating a slightly uncomfortable chair. The door to the conference room suddenly hissed open, and Engineering Chief Paxton stumbled in, followed by 2 repair drones. Paxton was human, a stocky man with graying hair, and the perpetually exasperated expression of someone who had spent too many years fixing things other people broke. Found the problem, he announced, wiping his brow with an actual cloth. So he did sweat, at least. That was somewhat reassuring. Some idiot routed the plasma conduit through the environmental processor. Been cooking you all like a Sunday roast for the past 3 hours. He noticed the room's occupants for the first time. The melting aliens, the comatose ambassador, the pile of Arctuvians in the corner, who had formed what appeared to be a furry, whimpering pyramid. Crikey, Paxton said. Why didn't anyone call medical? We were attempting to endure, Korthax wheezed. Pride of the coalition. Never show weakness. Standard protocol. Paxton stared at him. Mate, you're a funny color. Like, several funny colors. None of them look right. How are you humans both functioning? Yalith demanded, having found the strength somewhere deep within to form words. You are not even distressed. Paxton glanced at Maya, then back at the assembled aliens. Understanding dawned on his weathered features, followed immediately by barely suppressed amusement. Oh, right, the heat thing. Yeah, we get this a lot. He nodded to his repair. Drones, who immediately began working on the environmental controls. Humans are walking radiators, basically. We generate a lot of internal heat because of our metabolism, so we evolved really good cooling systems. Most species evolved to retain heat because space is cold, yeah? We evolved to dump it because Earth is hot, and we're hyperactive little murder monkeys who never stop moving. Murder monkeys? Ambassador Threlix surfaced briefly from her coma to repeat. What is a murder monkey? It's a term of endearment, Maya assured her, though the translation matrix struggled with the concept. The environmental controls suddenly kicked in with a blessed whoosh of cool air. The temperature began dropping immediately. All around the room, aliens began making sounds of relief that transcended language barriers. The Arctuvian pyramid dissolved as its members regained consciousness. Ambassador Threlix stopped melting, which everyone agreed was a positive development. Korthax felt his scales beginning to rehydrate, his thoughts cleared, and with clarity came the full, horrifying realization of what he had just witnessed. "You were comfortable," he said to Maya, his voice stronger now. "This entire time, you were not merely enduring, you were comfortable." Maya had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I mean, I wouldn't choose these conditions for a long meeting. But yeah, it wasn't terrible. Kind of reminded me of home, actually." Paxton had finished supervising the repairs and was preparing to leave. He paused at the door, turning back with a grin that Korthax was learning to recognize as the expression humans wore when they were about to say something they found hilarious, but everyone else would find disturbing. "Fun fact, Admiral, what you just experienced? That's like a mild summer afternoon in Darwin. That's where I'm from. We call 48 degrees building up to a hot one. My gran used to make me mow the lawn in 50-degree heat," said it built character. "Your species is insane," Yalith stated flatly. "Yeah, probably," Paxton agreed cheerfully. "But we're useful to have around when the heating breaks." He left, whistling something that sounded suspiciously cheerful for someone who had just been working in what amounted to an oven. The meeting reconvened, though everyone had silently agreed to take a 15-minute break for recovery, rehydration, and, in Threlix's case, resolidification. When they returned, the temperature had been restored to a comfortable 22 degrees Celsius, a standard that accommodated most species in the coalition. Maya had put her jacket back on. Korthax noticed this immediately. He also noticed that she had somehow acquired a steaming cup of what the humans called coffee, a beverage that was served at temperatures that could cause third-degree burns to most species. "Lieutenant Okonkwo," he said, unable to help himself, "you are drinking a hot beverage, in a climate-controlled room, after nearly cooking alive." Maya smiled, that same unsettling expression that suggested she was operating on a completely different set of biological rules than the rest of the universe. "Coffee helps me focus, sir. Besides, I got a bit chilly when the temperature dropped." "Chilly? At 22 degrees, after sitting comfortably in 49-degree heat. I need to update your species profile in the Coalition database," Korthax muttered, pulling up the relevant files on his command tablet. "The thermal tolerance ranges are clearly incorrect." "Oh, what do they say now?" Maya asked, leaning over with genuine curiosity. Korthax displayed the information. "Comfortable range, 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. Survivable range, 10 to 35 degrees Celsius. Extreme environment capability, limited." Maya nearly choked on her coffee. "We've got people living in Siberia where it hits -50, and people living in the Persian Gulf where it exceeds 50. On the same planet, by choice, -50? This from Commander Yalith, who had been quietly having what looked like an existential crisis in the corner. As in, 50 degrees below freezing? Well, yeah, cold's a thing too, but we're pretty good with that as well. Layers, insulation, understanding of thermodynamics. Plus, we just kind of evolved to be stubborn about our environmental conditions." Maya paused. "Actually, humans have adapted to high altitude too. Some populations live at over 4,000 meters, where the oxygen is thin enough that most species would suffocate. The Sherpa people in the Himalayas have developed larger lung capacity and more efficient oxygen processing. Human adaptability is kind of our thing," Korthax was furiously updating the database entry. This was going to require a complete overhaul of the Coalition's understanding of human biology. "Is there anything your species cannot adapt to?" he asked. Maya considered this seriously. "Well, we can't breathe underwater without equipment. That's a bummer. And we need to eat pretty regularly, or we get cranky. Oh, and we can't survive in hard vacuum, obviously. But give us a challenge and some time, and we'll usually figure something out. It's what we do." The casual confidence in her voice was what struck Korthax the most. Not arrogance, just simple, matter-of-fact acknowledgement of capability. Humans could survive in conditions that would kill most other species, and they acted like it was the most normal thing in the universe. "The war," Yalith said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at the commander, who had gone very still. "The war with the Krell Dominion. They're expanding from the inner systems." Korthax's scales went cold despite the comfortable temperature. He saw where Yalith was going with this. The Krell Dominion had been a growing threat for the past 5 cycles. They were a silicon-based species that thrived in extreme heat. Their homeworld orbited close to its star, bathed in temperatures that made today's malfunction look like a pleasant spring day. They had been conquering system after system, establishing colonies on planets that other species considered uninhabitable hellscapes. No one had been able to stop them. Every species the Coalition sent wilted under the heat of Krell-occupied worlds. The Dominion knew this. They used it. They had retreated to their high-temperature fortresses and dared anyone to come fight them on their terms. "You are thinking," Korthax said slowly, "that humans could operate in Krell territory." "I am thinking," Yalith replied, "that we just watched a human sit comfortably in conditions that incapacitated every other species in this room. I am thinking that the Krell's greatest defensive advantage might not be an advantage against humans at all." Maya had gone very quiet, her dark eyes thoughtful as she processed the implications. "How hot are we talking?" she asked. "On Krell worlds?" Korthax pulled up the data. "Their homeworld averages 65 degrees Celsius at the equator. Their colonies range from 50 to 70 degrees. The atmospheric composition is breathable for humans, we have confirmed that much. But the heat!" He trailed off. 65 degrees, Maya repeated. She pulled out her datapad again, fingers flying across the holographic interface. "That's hot, definitely, but not impossible. With proper hydration protocols and acclimatization periods, humans could operate in that range. Not indefinitely, but for tactical operations? Absolutely. We'd need cooling systems for extended stays, but we've built those before. The Apollo astronauts worked on the lunar surface in suits that reached up to 120 degrees Celsius. The numbers kept getting more absurd. Korthax was beginning to suspect that human evolution had been less about survival and more about spite. "And your military," he pressed. "Could they function as combat troops in those conditions?" Maya's expression shifted. The friendly, casual demeanor hardened into something else. Something that reminded Korthax that humans had fought their way up from persistence hunters, that they came from a planet that tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways, and they had not only survived, but thrived. "Sir," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "The United States Marines train in the Mojave Desert, where ground temperatures exceed 70 degrees. The French Foreign Legion conducts exercises in the Sahara. Australian SASR operates in conditions that make most planets look temperate, and those are just a few examples. If you need ground troops who can fight in Krell heat, humanity can provide them." She leaned forward, and there was something predatory in the movement. Something that made Korthax remember that humans were, in fact, descended from apex predators. "Sir, we've been waiting for a chance to prove ourselves in the Coalition. Everyone's been politely giving us guard duty and patrol routes, because we're the new species, the unknown quantity. But this? High-temperature combat operations? This is literally what we're built for. This is our evolutionary wheelhouse. The room had gone silent again. But this time, it was not the silence of heat exhaustion. It was the silence of a dozen military minds, simultaneously realizing that the balance of power in the war had just shifted. "I will need to take this to the High Command," Korthax said, finally. "But Lieutenant Okonkwo, I believe you may have just volunteered your species for the most dangerous assignment in Coalition space." Maya smiled, and this time there was no warmth in it at all. Just pure, focused determination. "With respect, Admiral, I didn't volunteer. I stated capability. But if High Command wants to deploy human forces against the Krell?" She stood, pulling her jacket straight in, a gesture that somehow conveyed both military precision and casual confidence. "We'll show them why Earth's a death world, and why that makes us the perfect species for a suicide mission that isn't actually suicide when you've evolved to laugh at environmental extremes." Korthax watched her leave, her spine straight, her movements efficient and controlled. The other officers in the room were already pulling up deployment scenarios, tactical assessments, logistical requirements, the boring, necessary work of turning a random observation into a military strategy. But Korthax's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about what Maya had said, about humans living at altitude, in deserts, in frozen wastelands, about them chasing prey until it died of exhaustion, about them developing technologies and tactics specifically to overcome every environmental challenge their planet threw at them. And he was thinking about the Krell, comfortable in their high-temperature fortresses, confident in their invulnerability. They had no idea what was coming for them. Admiral Korthax allowed himself a small smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that the universe's greatest problem might have met its match in the form of a species too stubborn to know when they were beaten, too adaptable to be contained by normal environmental limitations, and apparently too caffeinated to care about the difference. "Computer," he said to the ship's AI, "update the human species profile. Classification: Thermal extremophile, persistence predator, environmental adaptation specialist." He paused. "And add a note. Never, under any circumstances, assume a human is at their limit just because everyone else is dying. They are probably just getting started." The computer acknowledged the update with a pleasant chime. Korthax looked at the temperature display one more time, remembering the terror of those hours, thinking he was going to die, and the casual way Maya had simply taken off her jacket, like it was the most normal thing in the universe. Humans, he decided, were going to be either the Coalition's greatest asset or the universe's most elaborate cosmic joke. Possibly both. Definitely terrifying either way. 3 weeks after what had become known as the conference room incident, Admiral Korthax found himself standing in the Coalition High Command chamber, watching holographic projections of humans doing impossible things. On Screen 7, a squad of Terran soldiers was conducting live fire exercises in the Atacama Desert simulation. The temperature read 62 degrees Celsius. They had been operating continuously for 6 hours. 6 hours. The only concession to the heat was that they had rolled up their sleeves. On Screen 12, another group was being briefed for deployment. Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo stood among them, looking professional and composed. Korthax had learned that composed was humanity's natural state, which was deeply unsettling when you understood what they were composed about. "This is madness," Grand Coordinator Vesh announced to the assembled command staff. Vesh was a Talarian, a species known for careful deliberation and risk assessment. His crystalline exoskeleton reflected the blue light of the holograms. We are sending mammals into conditions that killed the last 3 expeditionary forces. Mammals with internal temperature regulation systems. It defies all logic." "Logic," replied General Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Corps, "said humans couldn't exist on Earth. Too hot, too cold, too many things trying to eat us. Logic said we couldn't cross oceans or climb mountains or survive in space. We've been defying logic since we figured out how to make fire, which, by the way, we did specifically so we could live in places that were trying to freeze us to death." Webb was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with gray at his temples, and the kind of face that suggested he had personally argued with physics, and won. He had arrived at Coalition Command 2 days ago, and in that time had managed to unsettle every species representative simply by existing comfortably in environments they found extreme. "The Krell have fortified 17 worlds," Coordinator Vesh continued, pulling up tactical displays. "Each one is a furnace. Our best projections suggest any assault force would have 30 minutes of combat effectiveness before heat casualties exceeded 80%. That is not enough time to establish a beachhead, let alone conduct a planetary assault." 30 minutes for your species," Webb corrected. "For humans operating in proper heat protocols, we can sustain combat operations for 8 to 12 hours with appropriate hydration and rotation schedules. And that is being conservative." "Conservative," Vesh repeated, his translator struggling with the context. "You consider 12 hours of combat in lethal heat to be conservative?" "Well, yeah. We are assuming worst-case scenarios with full combat loads and high-intensity engagement. If it is just occupation and patrol, we can maintain presence indefinitely with proper support infrastructure." Korthax watched the exchange with fascination. This was the part that no one had quite grasped yet. Humans were not proposing a suicide mission. They were proposing a standard military deployment. They genuinely saw no difference between this operation and any other. Commander Yalith, who had become something of an expert on human capabilities since the conference room incident, stepped forward. Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful, something beyond simulations. "What did you have in mind?" Webb asked. "The Vorash Range," Yalith said, and the room went very quiet. "On the 4th moon of Keltor Prime, volcanic region, surface temperature consistently above 70 degrees Celsius. We use it for drone testing because nothing biological can survive there for more than 15 minutes. Webb smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of challenge. "How soon can you arrange transport?" 4 hours later, Korthax stood in an observation bunker on the Vorash Range, watching his instruments with disbelief. The external temperature was 73 degrees Celsius. The landscape was a hellscape of black volcanic rock, sulfur vents, and shimmering heat distortion. Nothing lived here. Nothing could. General Webb walked out onto the surface, wearing standard military fatigues, combat boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that humans apparently called a boonie. He carried a full combat load of equipment. He was accompanied by Lieutenant Okonkwo and 5 other human soldiers. They began running an obstacle course. "This is not possible," Vesh whispered, his exoskeleton making small clicking sounds of distress. "Their core temperatures should be rising catastrophically. They should be experiencing organ failure." "Their core temperatures are rising," Dr. Hilara reported from the medical monitoring station. She was a Severian, part of the Coalition's best xenobiology team. "But slowly, and their cooling systems are compensating. Look at this." She displayed thermal imaging of the humans. "See how their skin temperature is actually lower than ambient? The evaporative cooling from perspiration is creating a boundary layer of cooler air around their bodies. It is remarkable. They are literally making their own climate." On the surface, the humans had completed the obstacle course and were now demonstrating combat maneuvers. They moved with precision and speed, communicating in short verbal bursts that their helmet systems transmitted. Contact right, 200 meters. Suppressing, moving, set. They flowed through tactical formations like water, adapting to imaginary threats with practiced efficiency. Webb was calling out scenarios, and his troops were responding instantly. A sniper position, here. A flanking maneuver there. Establishing a perimeter. Breaching a fortified position. 30 minutes passed. The time limit Vesh had mentioned. The humans showed no signs of slowing. They should be dead, someone muttered. Korthax was not sure who. 60 minutes. The humans paused for what they called a water break. They drank from insulated containers, poured water over their heads, and then resumed operations. They appeared slightly flushed, but otherwise normal. How much water are they consuming? Vesh asked. Approximately 1 liter per person every 30 minutes, Doctor, Helara replied. But they are expelling it almost as fast through perspiration. The efficiency is incredible. 90 minutes. The humans were conducting live fire exercises now, the crack of their projectile weapons echoing across the volcanic wasteland. Their accuracy had not diminished. Their movements remained sharp. 2 hours. Webb called an end to the demonstration. The humans formed up in a neat line and marched back to the bunker entrance. When they cycled through the airlock and removed their helmets, they were sweating heavily and breathing hard, but they were grinning. Well, Webb said, accepting a cold beverage from one of the support staff. That was refreshing. Bit hotter than I expected, but nothing a digger could not handle. A digger? Korthax asked. Australian slang for soldier? Webb explained. Though it is appropriate here. My grandmother was from Alice Springs, used to hit 50 degrees regularly in summer. She would have called this weather spicy. Vesh was staring at the humans like they were some kind of elaborate holographic prank. You operated at full combat effectiveness for 2 hours in conditions that should have killed you in 15 minutes. And your assessment is that the weather was spicy. To be fair, Maya interjected, still catching her breath, we would not want to do that every day without better cooling systems integrated into our armor. The next generation of combat suits has active cooling that will extend our operational window significantly. But for proof of concept? Yeah, we can work in Krell temperatures. Dr. Helara was reviewing the medical data, her tentacles twitching with agitation. According to my readings, your core body temperatures reached 39.5 degrees Celsius. That should be approaching critical levels. That is a mild fever for us, one of the other soldiers said. His name tag read Kowalski. Uncomfortable but manageable for short periods. With proper acclimatization, we can train our bodies to handle slightly higher core temps without cognitive impairment. Your species voluntarily induces fever states for military advantage, Yalith said slowly. When you put it like that, it sounds weird, Kowalski replied. But yeah, basically. Korthax noticed that the humans had already started their recovery protocols. They were drinking electrolyte solutions, eating high-calorie rations, and monitoring each other for signs of heat injury. How many human troops can you deploy? Vesh asked, and Korthax knew they had won. The coordinator's skepticism had evaporated in the face of empirical evidence. Webb pulled up a holographic display. For initial assault operations, we can field 30,000 troops within 2 weeks. That is drawing from our desert warfare specialists, tropical deployment forces, and volunteers from hotter climate regions. Within a month, we can have that number up to 100,000 with proper acclimatization training. 100,000 troops, capable of operating in conditions that are lethal to every other coalition species. Vesh, said. "The strategic implications are staggering." "There is more," Maya added. She looked at Webb, who nodded. "Sir, we have been reviewing Krell biology and defensive strategies. They have optimized everything for high-temperature environments, but that means they have likely sacrificed adaptability in other conditions." "Explain," Korthax ordered. "Krell are silicon-based, right? They require high temperatures for metabolic efficiency. But silicon becomes brittle at low temperatures. If we could somehow force a rapid temperature drop in their fortifications, we might be able to induce systemic failures in their troops and equipment simultaneously." "How would we achieve such a thing?" Yalith asked. "Their climate control systems are hardened against attack." "We are not thinking about attacking the climate control," Webb said. "We are thinking about attacking their star." The room went completely silent. Every species representative turned to stare at the general. "You want to attack a star?" Vesh said flatly. "Not attack. Modify. Temporarily." Webb expanded the holographic display to show a star system schematic. The Krell homeworld orbits very close to its sunday. The stellar output is what makes the planet so hot. But we have been developing solar engineering technologies. If we deployed a solar shade at the L1 Lagrange point, we could reduce the stellar radiation reaching the planet by 30 to 40%. That would drop surface temperatures by at least 20 degrees, Dr. Hilara calculated. More in some regions. But building such a structure would take years. Not building, deploying. Webb pulled up engineering specifications. "We have been working on self-assembling solar arrays for orbital power generation. The same technology, scaled up and modified, could create a shade large enough to impact planetary climate. Deploy time from arrival to full effect would be approximately 72 hours. Korthax's mind was racing. A 3-day deployment. Enough time to get human assault troops in position. Then, the temperature drops. The Krell forces slow down, become less efficient, possibly even enter hibernation states. And the humans, who had evolved to handle temperature swings of 60 or 70 degrees as a normal part of their yearly weather cycle, would barely notice. "This is either brilliant or insane," he said. "It is very much both," Webb agreed cheerfully, "which is why we are calling it Operation Cold Shoulder. The Krell have been giving us the cold shoulder diplomatically. Now we return the favor, literally. I hate that I find your species' sense of humor appropriate for military operations," Vesh muttered. "But I want to see detailed plans within 48 hours. If this is viable, we move forward immediately. The Krell have been expanding unchecked for too long." The meeting dissolved into tactical planning sessions. Different teams breaking off to handle logistics, engineering assessments, deployment schedules. Korthax found himself standing with Maya and Webb, looking at the holographic representation of the Krell homeworld. "You realize," Korthax said quietly, "that you are proposing to weaponize your own environmental adaptability. You are turning your ability to survive your deathworld into a military asset." "With respect, Admiral, we have always done that," Maya replied. "Every human military advantage traces back to Earth, trying to kill us, and us getting creative about survival. Persistence hunting became long-range patrol tactics. Climbing mountains became vertical assault capabilities. Swimming oceans became naval power. We are really just doing what we have always done. Adapt and overcome." "The Krell will not expect this," Webb added. "They have spent their entire expansion banking on thermal superiority. They have probably never encountered a species that could match them in high heat, and then casually operate when temperatures drop. It is going to be a very educational experience for them." "Educational," Korthax repeated. "You are invading their homeworld, altering their sun, and conducting warfare in conditions they consider extreme, and you are calling it educational. Would you prefer enlightening?" Webb offered. Despite everything, Korthax laughed. It came out as a sort of hissing chirp, but it was definitely laughter. I think I am beginning to understand why Earth is classified as a death world. It is not just that the planet is dangerous, it is that the planet created you, and you are somehow more terrifying than the environment that made you. Highest compliment we have ever received from Alien Command, Maya said solemnly, though her eyes were dancing with amusement. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Human troops poured into Coalition staging areas. Engineers worked around the clock on the solar shade components. Logistics officers coordinated supply chains for the massive amounts of water and electrolytes human troops would require. Intelligence teams mapped Krell defensive positions and identified priority targets. Korthax watched it all with growing appreciation for human organizational capability. They approached warfare the same way they approached everything else, with methodical efficiency, dark humor, and absolute refusal to acknowledge limitations. He also noticed something else. The other Coalition species were watching the humans with new respect. Word had spread about the Vorash range demonstration. Suddenly, the new species that everyone had been politely patronizing were being recognized as specialists in a domain no one else could touch. The deployment day arrived. Korthax stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, watching the assault fleet assemble. Human troop carriers flanked by Coalition warships. Engineering vessels hauling the components for the solar shade. Medical ships equipped with cooling facilities just in case, though the human doctors had assured everyone they would not be necessary. All units, report ready, the communications officer announced. General Webb, you are clear to proceed, Korthax transmitted. Acknowledged, Admiral. All human forces, this is Webb. Today, we are going to do something no other Coalition species can do. We are going to walk into hell and show them that hell is just a Tuesday afternoon in Darwin. We are going to fight in conditions that would kill anyone else and make it look easy. We are going to demonstrate why Earth is a death world, and why that makes us the most dangerous thing in the galaxy when properly motivated. There was a pause. Then Webb's voice came back, dripping with satisfaction. Time to educate the Krell about comparative planetary survival rates. All ships, jump in 3, 2, 1, execute. The fleet vanished into jump space. 72 hours later, Korthax received the first reports from the Krell homeworld. The solar shade had deployed flawlessly. Surface temperatures had dropped from 65 degrees to 42 degrees in the targeted assault zones. Krell defensive forces were experiencing what their own reports called catastrophic cold shock syndrome. And the humans? The humans were advancing according to schedule, reporting conditions as actually pretty comfortable, all things considered. The battle lasted 6 days. The Krell, for all their thermal advantages, had never developed tactics for fighting an enemy that was not only comfortable in their heat, but could also function when that heat was taken away. Their fortifications were optimized for high-temperature warfare. Their weapons systems required specific thermal conditions to operate efficiently. Their troops became sluggish and disoriented in the relative cold. The humans adapted. They always adapted. When the Krell tried to defend overheated bunker complexes, human troops assaulted through temperatures that would have killed Coalition forces. When the Krell tried to retreat to cooler underground facilities, humans followed them there too. When the Krell tried to destroy the solar shade, human pilots flew intercept missions through thermal updrafts that tore other species fighters apart. On day 7, the Krell leadership requested terms for surrender. Korthax was present for the negotiation, conducted via holographic link. The Krell High Commander was a massive silicon-based entity, her crystalline body structure reflecting the dimmed light of her suddenly cooler homeworld. "We did not think it possible," she said, her voice a resonance through mineral structures. We believed our thermal advantage was absolute. We have conquered 40 systems based on this assumption. You made a mistake, General Webb replied, standing in the command center looking entirely too pleased with himself. You assumed that because you evolved in high heat, no one else could match you there. You forgot that evolution is about adaptation to challenges, not just advantages. Earth threw everything at humanity. Heat, cold, predators, diseases, natural disasters, we survived it all. And that means we can handle pretty much anything the universe has, including your allegedly lethal temperatures. Your species is terrifying, the High Commander said simply. Yeah, we get that a lot, Webb agreed. But here is the thing. We did not come here to destroy you. We came here to stop your expansion and bring you into the coalition framework. There is room in the galaxy for everyone, including species that need things hot. You just cannot keep conquering everyone else because they cannot handle your climate. The High Commander was silent for a moment. What are your terms? The negotiations took 3 days. In the end, the Krell Dominion became the newest probationary member of the Galactic Coalition. They would maintain autonomy over their high-temperature worlds, but would cease expansion into systems claimed by species that could not survive Krell environments. In exchange, the Coalition would provide technological and economic support for Krell development along peaceful lines. And the Solar Shade? It was left in place, but modified. Instead of a weapon, it became a climate control tool, allowing the Krell to maintain their preferred temperatures while also creating cooler zones where Coalition representatives could visit without dying horribly. The human assault forces received a formal commendation from Coalition High Command. It was the first time in recorded history that an entire species had been recognized for unique combat capabilities. The citation specifically mentioned unprecedented thermal tolerance and exemplary adaptability in extreme environments. Korthax read the citation at the ceremony, standing before assembled Coalition forces and human troops. Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo stood at attention in the front row, her jacket properly fastened despite the comfortable 22-degree temperature of the ceremonial hall. The humans have taught us something important, Korthax said, looking out at the diverse array of species represented. They have taught us that survival is about more than just strength or technology. It is about adaptability, about refusing to accept environmental limits as absolute barriers, about looking at conditions that would kill most beings and asking not if we can survive, but how we can thrive. He paused, allowing his words to be translated into dozens of languages. Earth is classified as a death world. We use that term to describe planets that are hostile to most forms of life. But perhaps we have been thinking about it wrong. Perhaps a death world is not a planet that kills. Perhaps a death world is a planet that creates life forms capable of surviving anywhere, doing anything, enduring everything. He looked directly at Maya. Perhaps a death world is a planet that produces the most dangerous thing in the universe, explorers who think hell is just a warm day, and that adaptation is not a choice, but a way of life. The assembled troops erupted in applause, cheers, and various species-specific expressions of approval. The humans, characteristically, simply stood at attention and looked vaguely embarrassed by the recognition. Later, after the ceremony, Korthax found Maya standing on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Thinking about home?" he asked. She replied, "But also thinking about what comes next. We proved we can handle heat, but the galaxy is big. Lots of other extreme environments out there. You are already considering what other impossible conditions you can survive," Korthax said. It was not a question. Maya smiled. "Admiral, humans have a saying. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. The galaxy has given us a reputation as the deathworld species. Might as well lean into it. Besides, there are probably species out there facing threats we are uniquely qualified to handle. Cold worlds, high pressure, low gravity, toxic atmospheres. Earth prepared us for a lot. You terrify me, Korthax said. All of you, your entire species. Yeah, Maya agreed amiably, but we are your terrifying species now, and that has to count for something. She was right, Korthax reflected. The humans had proven themselves, not just as warriors, but as beings who looked at limitations and saw opportunities, who encountered the impossible and proceeded anyway. Earth had tried to kill them with heat, cold, altitude, depth, predators, diseases, and disasters. And they had survived it all, adapted to it all, and somehow emerged with the attitude that any challenge was just another problem to solve. The Krell had learned this the hard way. Their fortresses of heat had met a species for whom heat was just weather. Their absolute thermal advantage had encountered beings who had evolved to laugh at temperature extremes. And somewhere, Korthax suspected, the universe was taking notes. Because if there was one thing that was becoming clear, it was that humans were not just another species. They were what happened when a planet tried its absolute hardest to kill its inhabitants for millions of years and failed spectacularly. They were walking proof that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was not weapons or technology or even evolution itself. It was adaptability, stubbornness, and the fundamental human refusal to acknowledge when something should be impossible. The Admiral sighed, "No one can endure this heat," and the human took off her jacket. That simple action had changed everything. It had revealed a truth that would reshape galactic warfare, diplomacy, and understanding. Humans did not conquer extreme environments. They just showed up and acted like the extremes were normal. And that, Korthax decided, was the most terrifying survival trait imaginable.